Well, I feel like I'm addressing the white elephant in the room here, but why are we reviewing height and density before the social impact and the community integrated strategy is done?
Well, my recollection in January when Council gave us direction to do the social impact study and other exercises, including a Chinatown revitalization strategy, was that there was some discussion about whether or not Council wanted us to do that first. There was some discussion about when was the right time to do the social impact study relative to the timing of people occupying Woodwards and other projects in the downtown east side, for example. And there certainly is some benefit to the idea of doing the social impact study first. There are pros and cons to each. There was also a benefit in terms of putting clarity into the historic area about what the heights are, embedding those into policy, writing the guidelines and such sooner rather than later, because in the absence of finishing that work, there was the potential for additional speculation, additional lack of clarity about what was allowed, what was expected, etc. So that's always a bit of a debate. Certainly, I think Council probably was debating that, and we were debating that too. And so we've tried to move the social impact study along. It's going to be an interesting exercise as projects in the area complete and are filled with people. And you get different perspectives and different observations from that. But it was felt by Council and felt by staff that this work, which brought clarity to the situation, didn't need to wait for that. And certainly we've heard many perspectives from people who don't agree, and those people had an opportunity to say that to Council and have said that to us. But for better or for worse, that's been the nature of our recommendation. A tough recommendation, I have to say, because there were certainly pros and cons on either side.
Okay, thank you. Candace, we have a question in the back there.
Was it one more for this side, possibly?
Oh, sorry?
One more question for this side, possibly?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, sorry, Candace.
Hi, my name is Bill McCreary. I'm an NPA candidate for council next fall. And I'm also speaking from an architectural perspective, and you have a second opinion tonight from me that agrees with what Mike Geller said earlier, that from an architectural design and aesthetic opinion perspective, these new height requirements, I think, are seriously going to impact. The slides just prove it. The existing profiles of the view corridors and relative to the proportions of the mountains that you can see through those view corridors, I think are appropriate. The corridors that are going to be the end result of these changes that are being proposed are not, in my opinion, appropriate. They're just sliver views is all we're going to have, and we've just been told that everything is still going to be plus or minus. Well, I'm sorry, that's not good enough. Plus or minus doesn't cut it. And,
do you have a question for staff this evening?
Yeah, I'm going to ask you, why are we doing this?
Well, to avoid redoing the whole presentation, I think we've tried our best tonight to explain the rationale as we've gone forward. From staff's perspective, we do believe that there is a benefit to making very strategically located decisions for urban design reasons for taller buildings. And by definition, bring clarity to the situation about where tall buildings wouldn't be allowed. And some have suggested, for example, that they're worried that this might be another wave of tall buildings, and there might be another wave after that and another wave after that. Certainly from staff's perspective, we're trying to answer the question in a pretty definitive way. We've done a very detailed urban design analysis. There has been urban design inputs into that, including urban design consultants that we've hired as part of this process, both locally and experts from away. As part of our Vancouver Views process. So there have been many different perspectives brought to the table, and we've heard many different architectural perspectives as this process has gone along. Many second, third, and fourth thoughts, if you will. And our perspective is that if you do this carefully, strategically, and in specific situations, and then say that by definition the rest of the areas are going to stay the way that they are, it brings clarity to the situation. It protects the view corridors, but it also addresses that other half of the debate that went on over the last while that says, what about taller buildings of architectural interest that will change the nature of our skyline? What about taller buildings for greener city aspirations or for public benefit aspirations, or just to concentrate more jobs and people in a walkable environment on transit and lower our carbon footprint on a per capita basis? All of those things were credible arguments brought in the initial debate about whether you should penetrate view corridors or not. What staff believe is this is a recommendation that does both. It protects the view corridors, but it also does all those things that credible people in the community, including not professionals or developers, just regular citizens, were telling us. As Kevin said, the actual debate about the view corridors, notwithstanding council's decision to err on the side of protecting them, was actually rather split. It was almost 50-50, because people were saying, what's more important, an architecturally interesting opportunity or a skyline, or greener city aspirations, or reducing our carbon footprint, or protecting the views? Staff have always felt that that's an unfortunate choice, and what we like about the place where we are now is that we don't have to choose between those two. We can achieve both. So that's why we're prepared to recommend it, and then of course it'll be up to council whether they choose to do it or not.
Okay.
Your comments are based on the assumption that we have to have higher buildings. My question was, why are we doing this? Why do we need higher buildings?
Okay.
Well, Bill, actually, I don't agree with that. Nothing I said that we have to do taller buildings. I don't think you heard that from me. What I answered is why we think that there are benefits to taller buildings, but we don't want to do that at the expense of the view corridors. I think I was pretty clear in my answer, Bill.
Okay, thank you. We have about 15 minutes left for questions, so we're just going to go. Candace, yes, you have the front and then, or the back and then the front here. Thank you.
I'd like to know if there's any data out there that establishes that there's a direct causal link between the introduction of tall towers and the revitalization of communities in distress, in this case being Chinatown. In other words, if tall towers are supposed to fix Chinatown, how does the tool that fixes Chinatown, how does that tool work?
It's a great point, and what I've seen, certainly in my 20 years in this profession, is varying kinds of studies that try to establish that connection, but I would say that it's pretty hard to directly connect the two. The perspective that we heard from the Chinatown community during this process was that body heat, more people, more local citizens that would support Chinatown businesses, etc., would be a big part of revitalization of Chinatown. And you know, there's even some debate about whether that term revitalization is really appropriate. Many people feel that Chinatown is good the way that it is. Other folks have told us that it needs some form of revitalization. From our perspective, and we shared this with council, we have some concern about the idea that height is the automatic answer. Height, and in the case of our recommendation, very modest height, we believe can be part of the answer for revitalization. But what we stressed is that there are many other factors, many other influences on revitalization. And council actually directed us to do an economic revitalization strategy for Chinatown that would address many, many issues other than just height. Because I would agree that just looking at height, just looking at density and body heat, is only looking at a certain portion of the puzzle, a certain portion of the picture. So if you're interested, Tanis can give an update on our work so far on that Chinatown revitalization strategy. But I'd say we certainly don't limit that consideration to just height and density. It's just a piece of the puzzle from our perspective.
All right, thank you. And we have another question at the front here.
Yes, my name's Stephen Boas. I actually have a good couple of questions, but I'm not going to go into them all. I just want to keep it very basic. And I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding about protected views and view corridors and actually views across the city. And just one yes or no answer, but does the Queen Elizabeth Park view protect any other view which is not in the protected views across the city, which are public views? So if you take away or you play with the QE2 view, any view like elsewhere in the city, could there be an impact? Could there possibly be an impact if you just touch that one view? Just a yes or no?
I'm sorry, Stephen, I didn't follow that.
Okay, well, I'll try to rephrase. So we have a protected we've got a defined view from QE Park, right? And the suggestion is that you can look for opportunities for going higher by basically taking existing public views away from the public. But if you play or you touch the QE view cone, and you, let's say, allow a Burrard Gateway to go 550 feet, or you allow these Davy Towers to go to 375 feet, and I think the QE2 cone actually impacts that site. I'm not sure. I'll have to check the van map. So there's actually an impact. But can touching that QE view cone and not taking into account, let's say, as your study is suggesting, impact other views across the city? So with the higher building.
Other views, as opposed to
other
protected views.
Yeah, well, there are only 20, I think, views that are 20 points in the city that have been defined for views to take view corridors, and they're actually very specific. You have to stand but in terms of if you stand in one location, you look that way, there's a sliver there, and so on. But in terms of the number of locations that a person can stand at, I believe it's about 20 total. And are there views across the city that are protected as a result of those view corridors?
We're going to try our best to answer that, and no, we can't do it in a yes or no.
No, but is there an impact if you touch the QE?
If I understand you
corridor?
correctly, if QE didn't exist, would all of a sudden everything rise up? But the
Is
answer,
there any impact possible anywhere else in the city?
the reality is the majority of the other view corridors are much, much more restrictive than QE.
I think that perhaps in the interest of time, it might be best to take this conversation to at the end, unless you want to take another.
Well, I'll make a general point,
Okay.
because I've heard Stephen's point on this. If the point is that views, forget protected public views under policy, are views affected? The answer is yes. Just about any new building you do is going to affect some views, either public or private. Whether or not they affect, and you and I have had this debate before, from a policy perspective, we do differentiate whether or not a protected policy view is being impacted, recognizing that even if we say no, that still means that some view is being affected. For better, for worse, back in the 80s when these view corridors were established, the council of the day, the staff of the day, made very careful decisions about what they would protect and what they would not, recognizing that we're a growing city seeking to significantly raise our downtown population, for example, our downtown job space, for example. And decisions were made about what would be protected and what would not be. I answered for someone a question that said if you were trying to protect all views, policy or not, you know, to take that to an extreme, you would have a flat city. So for better or for worse, many views are being affected with every project that we have. As I say, we always seek to analyze at the zoning stage in detail the view impacts and do our best to mitigate, but recognize that every building that anyone lives in affects somebody's views, even if you live in a single-family house and your neighbor backs onto you. If you build a deck, you're affecting somebody's views. So we do, and we have been, focusing on the protected views that council established or that we're creating now. And we fully recognize that means other people's views, private or public, will be affected with every new building. And that's just the truth.